Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Global Math Department. My name is Lee Natero, and I will be your host tonight. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from Chris Luzniak about debate, exploring math through arguments, up for debate. So let me tell you a little bit about how these meetings work. These meetings are recorded and are available within 24 hours after the meeting ends. To view the recording, you would use the same URL you used to get here tonight. The Global Math community prides itself on being friendly and supportive. The chat room is available for topical and general conversation throughout the meeting. I'll catch your questions for the presenter, so don't worry that he will not hear them in the chatter. Although I've been told that tonight's session is going to be very interactive. So if you have not already introduced yourself in the chat window, I would ask that you do that at this time, telling us where you teach, what your Twitter handle is if you have one, and why you are attending this session tonight. All right, while you are introducing yourselves in the chat window, I would like to introduce Chris Luzniak. Chris is currently a math teacher and department chair at the Archer School for Girls in Los Angeles. His over 15 years of teaching mathematics began in New York City public schools, where he also founded and coached the speech and debate team. Through this combination of teaching and coaching, Chris has worked to develop debate routines that bring student voice and discussion into the math classroom. He coaches teachers in both math and science to develop real-world debate activities for students. Some of his work can be seen at Luzniak.com, and he is currently published by Stenhouse Publishers. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome. As we take another minute or so for people to log on and get situated, I want to just pose 2 questions to get your brain thinking, just non-mathy, so we can have a little fun debate to start up. And I also want to tell you that the resources, like copies of these slides and one of the handout things I'll show, are all on my website. If you visit Luzniak.com and click on speaking, look for the Global Math Department and click on the resources for that. Or if you're in the US and you text debate math as one word to 44222, it will send the resources and the slides right to your inbox as soon as you do that text. So take advantage of those, and I'll put these up at the end again as well if you want to get the resources. But let me just give 30 more seconds for people to say hello in the chat window, and for you, if you already said hello, to just think about these 2 questions for later on when we have a debate of how you would answer what the best movie or TV show is and what the most important thing you want your students to learn is. Okay, hopefully you had a little chance to think about that, but that's okay if not. Welcome everyone. I hope you had a chance to introduce yourself. Just to jump right in and introduce myself, again, I'm Chris Luzniak, and Lee, you gave me a great introduction there. And I am here because we need to empower our students to discuss and debate in math class. And I hope in the next hour to give you lots of ideas and examples and things that can get you going in that direction. Before we do that, just quickly about my background. I actually started teaching at the University of Connecticut. I was teaching at the teaching undergrad classes while I was in grad school. And this is a little stock photo there. That's not real math I was doing. But I was enjoying a lot the teaching that I was doing, and not as much of the research. So I, through the Math for America program in New York City, which was newer at the time, I moved to New York and I taught in an inner city public school in Brooklyn. I was in New York City for 9 years, teaching mostly at this school, the Urban Assembly School for Law and Justice there on the left. And then about 5 years ago, I followed my husband to California, and I now teach at the Archer School for Girls, which is an all-girls independent school in Los Angeles. So I've gone from East Coast inner city public school to West Coast single-gender independent school. And there's lots of different things that have happened along the way, differences between the schools, but teaching math is a lot similar between the two places. On top of teaching math, though, one of the common threads for me in my life has been speech and debate. I was a speech and debate student in high school, and I founded and coached a speech and debate team when I was in New York City. And I really loved seeing the excitement and enjoyment that debate brought to students. They wanted to stay after school and learn about healthcare or the war in Iraq or policy issues and politics and all kinds of things. I couldn't get them to leave my classroom after school. And I wondered why students were so engaged and excited to spend hours on their cases in debate and why that wasn't the same in my math class. So I started a journey to kind of explore ways to combine the fun of debate into math class. Around that same time, the Common Core came out, and SMP3 really spoke to me about constructing viable arguments and critiquing the reasoning of others. Like, that sounds like debate to me. Also, if you've more recently read NCTM's Catalyzing Change book, they talk about formal and informal arguments and students making claims. I do a lot of reading about the importance of discourse in math class, and I just keep seeing over and over again that classroom conversations are crucial, that students need to articulate and justify, reason through their own and others' explanations. And so again and again, I just keep seeing like students need to talk, and more importantly to me as a debate experience coach and whatnot, students need to debate. I want to throw in one more recently. I was doing a talk at a school about my debate routines, and it was the same day that I was listening to the New York Times podcast about this article that came out about the PISA scores, the recent ones, just this past December. And students were asked on a question to determine whether some evidence was fact or opinion. And for Americans, only 14% of American students could distinguish between fact and opinion. And again, I want students to be critical thinkers, to be able to reason and listen to different ideas, but able to differentiate what is just an opinion and what is really convincing and factual. And so it was stuck out to me as one more reason why we need debate in our schools, and why I, as my math teacher, I'm going to do my part to have debate in math class. I just keep reading more and more about debate, and there's tons of research about debate as an after-school program, as a class in the school day, as an activity in English class or a history class, that students learn from each other. The brain is firing up. They become more open to multiple perspectives. They're better at critical thinking and reasoning and all these things. Schools that start debate programs often have higher attendance and graduation rates. Students are more invested in the school and they're learning and all these things. So there's all these reasons why debate is so important. So the reason I started debate in my classroom was just I wanted to get kids talking. In my early days of teaching, I was a lot more of a traditional teacher, me at the front, doing some problems and having students practice after I did one or two with them, or just talk to them about the problems. So debate was my journey to start discourse in the classroom. Being a math class, it really helped having this debate routines as I built them to grow. What I really want my math students is more critical thinking and reasoning and proof making. And then an added benefit I got from this along the years as I've played with this and tinkered with this is that my students have become better listeners, more empathetic, more interested in current events and things like that. And so I think about all of these things that have come from me doing debate in the math classroom. Like that left column there are the reasons why are the ways I am helping create good math students. And the right column is how I'm helping create good global citizens. So I feel really that it is imperative now in this day and age in the US, where things are so politically divisive, and in many other countries as well. I want to create good math students as well as good global citizens. And so I hope debate can do that. So that's some of my why. And let's just now jump right in. Here's my plan for this hour, as much as I can squeeze in. We talked about the why a little bit, and then I want now the best I can while we are in this webinar format to get you to experience a couple of debate activities, to get your brain thinking of how this could fit in your classroom. Then we'll step behind the curtain and explore ways that you can actually do this. Like, what do you have to do for students? What kind of questions do you need, and things like that. And then we'll have a wrap up at the end. Okay, so that's the plan. Before we go any further, though, I want to first show a very short video of my classroom. When I was in New York about 7 or 8 years ago now, there was a PBS affiliate that was looking for examples of SMP3. Classrooms where the students were critiquing the reasoning of others and making arguments. And somehow, I don't even know how they heard about the debate stuff I was playing with, and they came and filled my classroom. So I'm going to show you a clip of my classroom from this video. It's just a quick 5-minute video. Just take a moment, take it in, and at the and near the end, I'm going to have you type in the chat box things that you notice and things that you wonder about my debate classroom. And here we go. I want you to explore some things about these coordinates. So quickly get started. We're gonna debate again. I start the first week or two with a unit on logic. We're talking about what makes something true. And in that, I introduce lots of my debate techniques and structures. We're moving into some stuff with coordinates. This time, Miss Smith is the one who's putting stuff up that might be wrong. Today, I put up a circle, and I had 3 angles that were labeled possibly correctly, possibly incorrectly. And I wanted students to use what they know about the unit circle. And the student's task is to critique the student work. It's either to find the mistake or find the missing step and add it in.
I don't understand 2C and 2D. I don't know how like those correspond with each other.
Do we like plug it in or something?
I was thinking that, but then if you do that, like wouldn't CD be right there, and then 2C, 2D would be like multiplying it by 2, making it like go higher up or something like that?
That's negative A, negative B.
This is
no,
not
that's
right,
wrong.
Because this is
yeah, it got to be positive, negative, not negative, negative.
Positive, not negative.
Okay, my lovely pre-calculus students, let me pause you all there.
I gotta figure out how to word this perfectly.
There's justifying why something works. So when we're asking the why questions in algebra, there's multiple different arguments and justifications that you might want students to make.
A and B, C and D, those are correct. I want to know about the relationships to the red ones. Are the red ones correct with the relationships that Ms. Smith is putting in? So let's start with Christina.
When you look at videos of good classrooms, you see the kids trying to understand each other. And you use this common humanity to motivate kids and help them learn.
My claim is that coordinates negative A and negative B is incorrect. And my warrant is that if you look at the circle like an XY coordinate plane, in order for AB to be correct, the black one, A would have to be negative. And if you flipped it over to the 4th quadrant over there, both of them can't be negative. Only one of them can be negative.
You see the kids, I understand it my way and I'm explaining it to you. And when you finally get it, I can see the look on your face when you get it. It makes me happy. This is normal human behavior.
You know how like with radian, what's true on one side isn't true on the other half of the circle? With degree. When I explain something to somebody, I find myself defining a lot more things, really making sure that they understand what I'm trying to say, so then it also furthers my understanding as well.
Someone want to add on to that or counter that or something? Let me go to Ethan. I know when I first started doing debating in my classroom, I was terrified of letting go of the class, and then one day I just took a chance and let go.
My claim is that negative A and negative B is correct because they're using variables A and B, not actual numbers like negative.
There's a lot of listening to the previous person and adding on to it or adding a different argument to it.
So I think it's correct.
So let's go to Amber. And
And so that really forces them to listen to each other.
Basically, I understand what you're saying, Ethan, but you said if it's negative, then you agree with Ethan. But if it is positive, then she's correct, because if you think about like the numbers, the x-axis over there is positive. So how can it be two negatives? Do you know what I mean?
It also gets them to look at each other instead of looking at me all the time for classroom discussions.
Basically, think about it like this. You're multiplying negative 1 times negative, let's say, 0.25. You get a positive number.
The shift in the Common Core I see is asking us to do more than just explain how we did something, is to explain why that works.
How can this be negative 1.3 if that negative 1.3 would have to be below this part? That makes sense, everybody?
Yeah.
Christiani?
It's moving beyond just these steps of how we solve equations. If we're really justifying why we solve equations this way, why these particular steps work.
The x is the actual coordinate of that angle.
Yeah.
But would this always work though?
Let's use different numbers.
Okay, I think we're back here. I just want to say that I made a bit.ly, just debate global math department, debate GMD. So bit.ly/debate GMD if you want to check that out. It's also linked on my website. It'll take you right to the PBS website. But can we just share out for a moment in the chat window, what are things you notice and wonder? And hopefully I will be addressing a lot of this in the talk as we go. But let me just take a minute for you to type in something you notice and or wonder. And feel free to keep sharing out. I'm just going to read out a couple of things like how students are standing up, they're working in pairs. I noticed students are so articulate, and the discussion got deeper and deeper. They were very engaged. I'm wondering how many debates they did prior to this, and you'd be surprised not many at all, actually. Notice talking to a partner before sharing out, high level of confidence. Civil discourse, respectful disagreement. I like that. How do we get to this point? I hope we'll be addressing that. A few questions about how to get them standing and how long it took to get to that point. Yes, examples in middle school. Yeah, we'll get to that. This problem did have a correct answer. There's a question in there about that. Good. A lot of noticing and wonderings about the standing and talking with a partner, the confidence and engagement. And this is kind of what I was saying at the very beginning about like why I started this journey. I saw my debate students were really engaged in learning about anything and everything they could. And maybe math class wasn't that engaging to most of the students. And so I wanted to help bring that engagement in. So let's explore a little bit about this. So I want to first talk to you about how I tell students what an argument is. And I just do it in the first week of school. Like math class is rooted in making arguments and being full of reasoning. And it just takes 2 minutes. I'll show you right now how I do it. Here's what I do with students. I say, hey, we're going to have some arguments in math class. And you need to know this definition is what an argument is, a statement made with sound reasoning. You don't need to know the definition at all, but you do need to know that an argument has two parts. It has the claim, which is your opinion. Like I claim dogs are better than cats. I claim math is more fun than science. I claim the West Coast is better than the East Coast. Whatever controversial statement, opinion you want to have, that's your claim. And the justification is, the fancy word for that is the warrant. So my claim is dogs are better than cats, and my warrant is because they are so soft and fluffy or obedient or whatever you want to say as your justification. So putting that together in math terms, an argument is a claim plus a warrant. You can forget all of this. All you need to know is that from now on, whenever we debate, and unfortunately we can't talk to each other on this thing, but we'll do it over the chat. Whenever we debate, and when my students debate in my class, they use this sentence frame. My claim is and my warrant is. And this is hung up on every single wall in my room. There's a small poster up so that if they ever forget, it's always within eyesight. And so let's begin. That's all you need to know how to debate. So the most basic way I debate, the first activity I start with is a soapbox debate. Students do not know what a soapbox is anymore, and I usually don't even explain as much. But what I do say is that when we do a soapbox debate, that means you are going to stand up, give a claim and warrant, and then sit back down. And then someone else will stand up, give a claim and warrant, and sit back down. So similar to what you saw in the video a little bit, people are going to stand up and give a claim and warrant one at a time. I'll take 3, 4, 5, 7, however many I want, just to get some different opinions. So just to get all of you practicing with the language of claim and warrant, can everyone take a moment, type in using the sentence frame, my claim is, and then give a best movie ever, and then give a reason for it with a warrant. I'll read just like 2 or 3 of them out in a moment. But what is the best movie or TV show ever? Go. Starting to get some in. So we have, my claim is that Judge Judy is the best TV show ever, because we should change that to my warrant is, she is so good at seeing right through the BS people lay out for her. Awesome. I have another one. My claim is the best movie ever is The Wizard of Oz, and my warrant is that Dorothy always had hope that she would, I just lost it, would return home. Nice. We have some different movies, Spaceball, TV show, Fringe, Whale Rider. Awesome. So we can pause there. If you want to throw another one, feel free. But that's just what you just all debated. That's how we get started. Just give me anything you want to say, but you have to back it up with a warrant. You can't debate if you don't have some reasoning behind it. One thing I want to emphasize is when I tell students the definition of an argument, I emphasize that, if I go back a slide here, that it says it's a statement made with sound reasoning. Nothing in there says it's whoever is the loudest or most emotional. It is a very professional way of sharing different ideas and trying to be convincing. And the way you are convincing is through a strong warrant. Okay, let's do one more. I'd like to have you share out in there before we get into mathy stuff. Answer this any way you want. And I tell students all the time, in a debate, you can interpret it any way you want as long as you can convince us. But fill in the blank. The most important thing I want my students to learn is. Interpret that any way you want. Let me give another 30 seconds for people to type in claim and warrant form, what's the most important thing you want your students to learn? And use claim and warrant. So I'm going to read off a few of these. I have, my claim is the most important thing is to be able to think analytically. And my warrant is that it will serve them in many areas of their life. My claim is they need to learn how to learn, and my warrant is then they can access any new topic. My claim is the most important thing I want is my students to learn is to be good people. Oh, I just lost it. Too many of you at once. Sorry. And my warrant is that nothing else matters if you aren't kind. I like that. So you have some claims about it wants students to think logically, to have empathy, to have a growth mindset, and so on. I just want to point out, and this is for another talk another day, no one has said the most important thing is the Pythagorean theorem or the quadratic formula. We are all talking about how we want to build good student skills in terms of thinking and learning. And I've done this talk in various forms with many teachers over the years, and almost never does anyone say any math content is the most important thing. So just keep that in mind as a little side note. But good. Okay, so we have the claim and warrant routine down a little bit. So we're going to speak in claim and warrant whenever you share out now, whenever you're giving an argument. So from now on, though, I want everything we do to be rooted in math. We're not just going to, I just start fun, just TV show, movie, and things like that, just to get the routine down for a moment. But now let's jump into a math question. So let me pause again for 30 seconds so you can think. And then enter in the chat room box a claim and warrant for this. Blank is the best method for solving this system. Y equals 2x and y minus 1 equals x. Okay, we have my claim is substitution is the best method for solving, and my warrant is you already know what y equals. Okay. Another one for substitution. My claim is substitution is the best method, and my warrant is that the first equation is already solved for y in terms of x. Okay. By the way, I always tell my students it is totally fine to have the same answer. Right? Two of us may enjoy substitution as the best, but our warrants in our own words will be at least slightly different. Some more substitution. We have a claim that using Desmos is the best method for solving the system. And the warrant is that it is the most efficient, accurate, and fastest. Great. More substitution. It's already set up for it. More substitution. We have an elimination. My claim is elimination. And my warrant is you can subtract and know that x equals 1. Great. Some more Desmos options and so on. I just noticed, think about your own students. If this was a question for them and they were sharing out what they think is the best method, you are getting a chance to see which students love the visual of Desmos, and they really like to see the intersection points in the two lines, and which students really love the nitty gritty of just like messy algebra work and want to just dig in with all that kind of stuff. So not only are we getting students to talk about the methods and they're hearing that from each other, but I'm getting just a little more about their personality and their personal preferences and different ways of solving as we go along. Okay, so then let's just keep building on that as we go. I like always, sometimes, or never questions. So I want you to take a minute to think about either one of these. Just pick one. And how would you answer it in terms of always, sometimes, or never, but in a claim and warrant form. So you can claim it's always true or sometimes true, and then give a warrant why. Choose one. The first one says when you cut a piece off a shape, you reduce its area and perimeter. And second one, Max gets a pay raise of 30%. Jim gets a pay raise of 25%. So therefore, Max gets the bigger pay raise. Pick either one, always, sometimes, or never true in a claim and warrant. So for number 2 about the pay raise, we have my claim is I don't know who gets the bigger pay raise, and my warrant is that I don't know the beginning salary of either. Okay, so maybe that's is that maybe a sometimes true. I heard my claim is this is sometimes true, and my warrant is that it depends on how much each of their base pay is. Okay, so we're getting the idea of base pay. Think of how many students don't understand that difference and would jump on it right away. Yeah. For the first one, my claim is if you cut a piece off of a shape, you don't always reduce its area and perimeter. My warrant is that you can actually increase the perimeter if you don't make a straight cut. And I just want to point out that first one, okay, we can pause there as you share out your last thoughts here. The first statement, when you cut a piece off a shape, you reduce its area and perimeter, was actually something a student said in the middle of a geometry lesson, and I was able just to pause the class and say, let's ponder this for a second, and then have them either talk to a partner or whatnot, and then share out. We did like a soapbox debate with using claim and warrant of, do we think it's always true or sometimes true, or how we tweak it? And it was a great moment because we had this culture and this routine of debate already set up in my classroom that students were able to think about and share their opinions on it. And they were working through, these are younger students, working through like, what does it mean to cut off? Does that have to be, or cut a piece? Does that have to be a straight line, or could it be like a curvy line that makes the perimeter longer? They were asking, does the word "and" matter? Something we hadn't talked about yet. And so we got into the discussion of like, do the area and perimeter both reduce, and what does that mean? And so it was a great chance in the spur of the moment to have an impromptu debate about this stuff. So let me just show just quickly. We won't do these in discussion form. I'm just going to show a couple more examples. I work with all kinds of teachers in classrooms, all the way from calculus. So here's a calculus one I do at the beginning of every year with limits, all the way down to elementary school. Just multiplication, 8 times 8, what's the coolest solution? And either show student works and like their examples of how they pictured or how they worked through that problem, or have like just an open-ended question of who can make the coolest solution. I just want to point out the calculus one here about limits. I asked which one has the best mistake. I love best mistake questions and putting 3 or 4 problems down there because first of all, students have to actually work through all 4 problems so that they know and can articulate what the mistake is. And they are more motivated to work these 4 problems out than if I just gave them 4 problems to solve because of the element of debate. And second of all, putting the word best with mistake shows that I am valuing mistakes in some sort, and they're going to debate in a way that says this mistake is better than that one, or this one is really cool mistake, or I make that one too. And so I'm starting to normalize in my classroom mistake making and embracing mistakes as part of the learning process. So it's just ways that I've done some debates over the years with various grades. All right, so after I've done a bunch of soapbox in the beginning of the year, I can do it once a week. I can do it daily. It just varies from year to year and class, and it's for you. It can vary based on what you want to do and your routines and things like that. I know some teachers who have like debate Tuesday, and that's their warm up every Tuesday. I do it at least like twice a week, but it may be beginning or middle or end of class for various reasons. But after I get soapbox going in September, early in the year, I got kids in the routine of standing up and giving a claim and warrant. Now I want to make sure they're listening to each other. So I introduce a new layer to soapbox debate, which I call circle debate. And what's going to happen is, here's a which one doesn't belong. If you're not familiar, wodb.ca, check those out. They're great. There's 4 items there. In this case, we have 4 numbers, 9, 16, 25, 43. And each one of them has some reason you can come up with why they don't belong. And I'm just going to ask students to give a claim and a warrant about one of the numbers, why that number might not belong. And the reason I call it circle debate, what's different about it is after the first student goes. So maybe the first student says, I claim 9 doesn't belong, and my warrant is that it's the only single-digit number. From then on, each student is going to first summarize what the previous person said, using the, if you see the bottom there, I add the little I heard, and then give their claim and warrant. So the next person might say, I heard Lisa say that 9 doesn't belong because it's the only single-digit number. My claim is that 43 doesn't belong because it is the only one that's not a perfect square. And the next person will say, I heard that 43 is not a perfect square. My claim is, or whatever, and they can go from there. So I'm just adding this element of like kind of like a chain of events where just everyone's summarizing the previous person before we go on. That's one variation that I have. And then as another variation, if you have those students who really just love to stick to one method, like with the systems of equations we did, the students who just love graphing or just love substitution and want to stick to that one method, I want to push students to be a little bit more flexible and be able to debate and talk about all the sides. So sometimes I'll do what I call a point-counterpoint debate based on this game, Would You Rather, which has questions like this. And so in a point-counterpoint debate, the first student gets to pick what they want to do. So maybe the first student says, I would rather have crayons for teeth. And my warrant is because I like that I could always color something in on the go. From then on, the next person has to argue the opposite of the previous person. So no matter what the next person's personal feelings are, they have to argue for, the second person would have to argue for spaghetti, and the third person would have to argue for crayons, and then back to spaghetti. So it's like a ping pong back and forth between the two options. But I have students ahead of time, I tell them, prepare both sides, something for both sides of this, so that when I call on you, maybe I'll call on you randomly, maybe I'll have the speaker call on you, maybe I'll ask for volunteers, any mix of that. But you have to be ready to go with both versions. So I do this a little bit later in the year, October, November, just to get them used to thinking about multiple perspectives and being ready to argue more than one side of things. A math version of this here at the bottom is a middle school one. If you look at the problem in the box, find 45% of 80. Maybe they want to set it up using a proportion like 45 over 100 equals x over 80. Or maybe they want to use decimals and do 0.45 times 80. And so we could go back and forth with something like that. If any of you know the website from John Stevens, Would You Rather Math, has great questions with two sides. Like here's an example. Which would you rather purchase jeans from? Store A, which is 30% off one pair, or store B is $30 off one pair, or $30 off total, I guess. Yeah. And as another example, I love best mistake. So here's just simplifying messy radicals in like an Algebra 2 class. And I had students kind of write out all of their steps very thoroughly. This was like after a quiz, I took 2 mistakes from different quizzes and typed them up so they were anonymous. And then I asked students what was the best mistake. And so I gave them time to think and talk with a partner and actually find the mistakes. And it was really good to see which groups couldn't find the mistakes in one of them. And so I was able to help out, or they were able to hear from their classmates about what it was. And so we got to build from there. And then we could go back and forth, and I could force students to always jump to the other side with the point-counterpoint debate. So that's a bunch of examples. Please feel free to throw questions in the chat box as you have them, and I'll come back to them later, or Lee can help me find them later. But it really comes down to the power of this statement, my claim, my warrant. And like I said, I hang it on all 4 walls of my classroom, so it's always within sight for students. I force them in the beginning of the year to make sure they use this sentence frame exactly as it is. My claim is and my warrant is. I don't want the word because. Later in the year, I get a little more lenient with I don't care if you forget to use one of the words at times, because we all do. But at the beginning, I really want to stress it because I really want to get this habit down. And it becomes almost sing-songy to the students, like it's my claim is, my warrant is, my claim is, my warrant is. It becomes this very ingrained routine. And then once anyone comes in my class and asks what we're doing, students often say this to visitors. Every answer to Mr. Luzniak's class always has 2 parts, which is music to this math teacher's ears. I want students to always be explaining their answer as they go along and making sense of their answer throughout everything they do. So I'm so glad that this routine has developed them into always wanting to explain their answer. Even I find often on questions when I don't even ask them to explain, they'll just say like, oh, the answer was 7, and my warrant is that if you add 2 to both sides, you'll get 7. They just get in this habit of always explaining themselves, which I love. And so even if I don't ask them, they're constantly like wanting to prove themselves and give a warrant to it. And just to end this part of the talk with some more examples really quickly, I don't know how many of you know what's going on in this graph. Sharon from the New York Times Learning Network, who is in charge of this, is actually on this chat right here. Hi, Sharon. I love doing this. The New York Times Learning Network puts out, with the American Statistical Association, I think it's called, puts out a interesting graph from a previous article every week. And on Wednesday, there's a moderator, and students can leave comments about what they notice and wonder and make an interesting title. So I love these cool graphs. This is one of my favorite ones from last March. Just like it looks cool with like the size of the bubbles and things. It takes students a minute to look it over and interpret and make sense of it, and then they start to make all kinds of conclusions, and they start to give claims and warrants of like, I claim that coal is no longer useful, or I claim that we should invest all of our money in natural gas, or whatever, but they give a warrant that's based on this graph. Here's a more recent one. This was just last week. I think I cut the title off accidentally, but this is the readability of privacy policies on apps and websites. And we had a great discussion. And this is like my 5-minute warm-up every Wednesday. Students just know when they come in, they Google what's going on in this graph and take a moment to share with a partner things they notice and wonder. And it often takes them like 2 or 3 minutes just to make sense of like the way the axes are labeled or what they actually represent and kind of making sense of it. And then once they do, they have all kinds of conclusions they make. And they, like in this particular one, students were wondering why Walt Disney had such a high readability score. It was like so hard to read if it's something that's intended for children and families. They really wondered why the BBC was so easy and short compared to all the rest. And maybe that was like a European thing versus an American thing of wanting to be very clear and easy to read. And so they started to make conclusions on this. And then the claim and warrant was just a nice way to have them engage in the discourse in a professional way so we could talk about it. Over the summer, I recently read this quote from a book I was reading about brain science and what makes messages stick. And the author said, if you open a session with a debate, people will be more inclined to take a critical stance toward the information you present. He was talking in this chapter about how the way you start a class, kind of like breakfast is the most important meal of the day, kind of sets the tone for the lesson. And so if you're opening with discourse and debate, students are like, their mind is primed to have a critical stance and to be analytical and look for reasoning and trying to make some reasoning as we go along the way. So anyway, so I do debate often as a warm-up, as a short thing, a soapbox debate, a what's going on in this graph, all kinds of things. And then it spills over into everything I do in my classroom over time. Like sometimes intentionally, I'll put it on a worksheet, like here, going back to systems of equations, I can on a worksheet ask them to first give a claim and warrant of what's the best way to solve this system, and then show their work and solve it. So instead of doing 10 problems, I want them to do like 5 where they give claims and warrants before they jump in. So I'm starting to have them think about which one is the most effective strategy and things like that. In textbooks all the time, not all the time, but often there's a question like part C or part D. It's like, which one does your team prefer? Or, you know, which of the 2 things you saw, which one would you think is the better one? So there's some moments in there already for debate added in. And so I want to capitalize on that. I include warrant as language in my quizzes and tests. So here's a quiz question from logarithms. So without using a calculator, what 2 integers is the answer in between? The question was a log base 2 of 11, and they had to give a warrant. So again, they just have this routine down of claim and warrant. So of course they answered it, and then they gave a warrant as well. When I taught in New York City, and as we were preparing for the state exams, before we started, before they went for the exams, that week, I would always tell my students, just so you know, if the test asks you to justify, that means they want a warrant. And my students knew exactly what that was. They had to write at least a sentence or 2 to explain, and they had to be convincing, like they were in a debate. When I teach geometry, proofs seem totally natural after having this routine down in classroom. Instead of statement and reason, I use claim and warrant as my 2-column proof title. And students by this point in the year, when I'm introducing proofs, they're like, of course I need to give a second column, because every answer we've done so far this year always had to have 2 parts. You had to say something and then give a reason behind it. And so proofs just make sense in that 2-column format for them. Really quickly, so we don't run out of time, I just want to show one more example. I like to take worksheets and turn them into little debate cards. So here's an example. If we were doing a lesson or 2 or several on area of irregular shapes. We know there's like the adding method where you break the shape up into small pieces and add up the areas of the small ones, or the subtraction method where you do the area of the whole thing minus the white space. So I might put this on a card that looks like this, where one side says solving by adding is best and one side says solving by subtracting is best. And I'll have a bunch of cards like that, and they'll be face down in a deck of like 5 or 6 of them, and students one at a time will flip them over, and whatever side is facing them, whichever box with the words on them is closest to them is the side they have to argue. So they may flip it over so that the adding side is facing them or the subtracting side is facing them. So they're going to solve the problem that way and then tell their neighbor or their partner why their way was the best. And so there's a bunch of these on my website. I'll show this more later that you can play with. I just want to shout out my friend Carla here in Southern California. She made examples of these for her middle school class with solving for X, where she asked, should you combine like terms first, or in this case, add 8 first? And then she made a worksheet to go with it where students were solving and then filling in their claim and warrant. And so they could really talk about their reason behind it as well. And that's a whole lot of examples. I hope you got some experience as best we could virtually of what it could feel like doing a debate as a student. In our next 10 or 15 minutes here, I want to talk about how to get this started in your classroom and then kind of wrap up with any last thoughts and questions. So really quickly, the 2 pillars I talk about to teachers all the time to get this going in your classroom is that you need to tell students what to do, the talking routines, and then you need to make questions that are debatable. And I talk about question enhancements, which I'll get to in a second. But first, talking routines, I have read a lot about how students have lots to say, but often they just don't know what you want from them. They don't realize what they are expected to do. So if we want them to debate, we have to teach them how to debate. And that my answer to that is this: my claim is, my warrant is. That sentence frame has a lot of power and has I've gotten a lot of mileage out of it over the years. There's something about it, and I don't have any research behind this, but there's something formal about it because the words claim and warrant are not part of the student's everyday vocabulary. It makes the debate more formal and professional. It makes the things they're saying a little bit less personal. And I see that students are now debating an idea instead of debating each other. So students don't feel attacked and don't feel as afraid to join in when they're using this sentence frame. I just want to share out some teachers on Twitter who have tried this over. My friend Patricia here in Southern California, she loves to say the sentence frame is money. The students just know what to do. And so once she did it, things were taking off. Our students can have a lot of fear of both math, like their math anxiety, as well as fear of public speaking, like talking in front of the whole class, as well as just in front of a group. Having this sentence frame briefly brackets off some of those fears and allows them to enter the conversation. I see a lot of students feel empowered because I'm asking them to say just one sentence, my claim is, my warrant is, and half the words they're saying are words I'm making them say, so it feels a lot less personal, a lot safer to jump in. And I see again and again teachers who have tried this say to me that they were so surprised that the quietest students, the students who are normally quiet in their classroom or not often speaking up, are the ones who really jumped up and were eager to share in. They were able, because they were sharing an opinion and there wasn't just what's the answer, they felt more invited. Even if they weren't comfortable with the math fully, they could share some ideas and give some arguments about it. Here's just more examples. Students could be hesitant at first, but it really can make a visible difference over time. And for Carla, back to Carla, who's making that worksheet, the debate math language has become the norm for her in her classroom, which I love. Students are always giving claim and warrant. Even if you see on the worksheet there, she just asked for an explanation, but they went ahead and gave a claim and a warrant. So it's all down to that. I tell teachers all the time, you can change these words, but I try to keep them as what I call fancy words. They're just not part of the student's everyday vocabulary, and play with them. I know a science teacher, a friend of mine, who changed it to my hypothesis is and my evidence is. That's fine too, like however you want to do it, but just make them a little more formal and a little less personal, however you want to play with that. And that's my talking routines bit there. The second thing then is we need to give students questions that are debatable. I can't ask them what 2 + 2 is because there's nothing to debate there. I could change the question though to make it debatable. Before we get there, let me just say, first of all, think about ways that there already are debate things out there, either in your curriculum, like in a textbook, like which one do you prefer, or whatever, or things that are online, like which one doesn't belong, questions, things like that. There are some things already that are just open to debate and are primed for that. Always, sometimes, never questions, maybe. But I think you can take nearly any question out there and make it debatable with some keywords. My favorite ones to go with are the words best and worst. And you saw me do that some already with best mistake, or you could do like best first step. I'm really quick at turning questions debatable simple because I've done it for so long, so many times. It's like a muscle to build. So I just want to pause here for 1 minute. I want you to think about one of these. Like if you were teaching a class where you're graphing trig or graphing parabolas or graphing lines or plotting points or just adding or multiplying 8 plus 10, 8 times 10, how can you write a question where I still want students to do the math, but there's some opinion around it? And think about those words best and worst that kind of force or invite an opinion. And feel free, if you think of one, to type it in the chat room box. I'll share out a couple. How can you take, I still want to make sure students know how. So I want to see if they can graph a line. How can I ask a question about it with maybe the words best and worst so that it is debatable? So I'm already seeing some things like, what's the best way to find the x-intercepts? Maybe like in a parabola through factoring or graphing. What's the best way to graph this line? Maybe a table, maybe looking at slope. Yeah, the best way to graph a line. I hear a lot of like, over the years I've heard like, what's the best first step? I love the last one, just like if you want students to make sure they know how to plot a point 8, 10. Someone asked recently, a teacher came up with a question, which one of these is the most important number, the 8 or the 10, the x or the y coordinate? I kind of love that question because there's, of course, no right answer, but students latch onto that and form an opinion of the x or the y going across or going up is more important. Like, what do you do first, or which one's gives it the height that you want? And then they start to internalize the process of graphing and plotting points a little more, so it sticks with them. What's the best way to start this question? I like that. The best mistake someone might make when graphing a line. I love it. Yeah, so you're getting the idea of it. I have a very big claim that I think any single math question out there can be made debatable. And I dare you to stump me with this. We're going to be low on time here, but if you want to tweet at me later, I'd love to hear a math question and try and make it debatable. It's my favorite thing to do is to turn everything debatable whenever I can, and I've yet to be stumped. So feel free to think of a math question. I'll see if I can come up with a debatable question for you. So that's it with how to get started. Getting the 2 pillars of getting students to develop talking routines of some sort, some kind of sentence frame so they know what to do. And the second part is creating questions with the best and worst so that they are having actual debatable questions that they can latch onto. Really quickly, I just want to bring us back to how we started. The reasons why I want to debate. I want to create good math students, and I want to create good global citizens. And I hope some of the things you've seen today, you can start to see how students are listening to each other and open to multiple perspectives and creating empathy and creating reasoning and critical thinking and all of this stuff. I was really empowered by the students of Parkland, Florida after the school shooting, was it like 2-3 years ago now? And I was reading a lot of articles, and this one from the Miami Herald talked about how the reason these students were able to speak up on the national stage on all these talk shows and news, CNN and all these things, was because a lot of them had a lot of debate experience. Their school had debate programs as an after-school club, as a debate course. And so I want to do my part as a math teacher to help students feel empowered and to learn to raise up their voices professionally so that they can also join in the global discussion whenever they need to. I'm going to skip over this, but I want you to think about what's one thing you can do this week. If you want to tweet it out in the next hour or two, I come back to that hashtag debate math all the time. So if you tweet out something you're going to do this week and put a hashtag debate math on it, I will come back to it and I will follow up with you so that we can have a conversation, and I will hold you accountable. So feel free to do that. I just want to shout out lots of teachers. A bunch of people here have different examples. If you just use that hashtag debate math, you'll see examples from like transformational geometry. This was a great one. What would make the coolest rectangular prism with a volume of 24? There was an exit ticket about percents. My friend Claire did one on based on this screenshot you see here. Can you define what a logarithm is? And just using that claim and warrant stuff, you can get it all going. My final thoughts, I just want to say there's a lot to do here. I'm hoping to give you lots of ideas and play with it, try a lot of different things, and I'm happy to chat with you. When I first started, I thought my classroom was going to look like this. If I was going to have students talking and debating, what chaos would ensue. I was, again, a pretty traditional teacher. I was at the center of at the front of the room leading the discussion. But I tried it once in like October, the year that I started doing these debates, and it went fine for a 5-minute warm-up. But I spent all of September, October that year just preparing for a 5-minute warm-up where I was going to let go and let students debate. And then they did it. It went great. But then I just didn't do it again for another 2 more months. And I took some time to think about, okay, well, maybe I'll do it again in like January, February. And so my first year, I didn't do it often. And so I do it daily now, impromptu, often, like just things will come up and I'll stop and have a debate on it. I'll just throw it on as a question on a quiz or a worksheet activity or something. So it's part of my practice every day now, but I started slow. So don't feel like you have to jump in and do it every day. Just play with it as you go along. Some quick advice is to start fun. If you think about, we started with what's the best TV show or movie. So get the routine down. With something that's non-mathy, so just students can feel comfortable sharing their opinions. And then whatever you do, keep it simple and consistent. I like the claim and warrant is just one sentence. There's not a whole, I don't have 10 different sentence frames for them to choose from. It's just the one thing we always come back to, so it keeps it really simple. And lastly, don't give up. If something doesn't work, feel free to tweet at me or just tweet out in general, and people are happy to brainstorm with you. I'm happy to brainstorm with you. And we can think about what might work better for your classroom with your students. Only you know what will work best for your students in your school and your situation and your course and so many things. There's so many variables, but I'm happy to brainstorm with you and come up with ways. I've worked with plenty of teachers and have lots of ideas. So do not give up. I think it's really imperative that all students feel that they have access to math and that all students become better global citizens. As a wrap up real quickly, if you go to luzniak.com, my website, under debate math, the resources, you'll see on this, like on the slide here, there's a bunch of different debate cards you can play with. So people have created some and they've shared them with me and gave me permission to add them on there. So you can go ahead and download their examples. If you want to make some and share them, I'm happy to add more onto the website. This is just free for you to come and take from different, these are from different topics. I recently have been lucky to put all these ideas down into a book. With Senhouse Publishers. So if you go to senhouse.com/debate, you can see the how to order the book if you'd like. If you're not in the US and you go to that hyperurl.co/up4 and debate, up for debate, it will take you to whatever is the in your region or your country where the book is being sold. Check it out. It was something I did in my spare time as a teacher, if we ever have spare time. But that is it for me. I made it with 2 minutes to spare. Thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, feel free to tweet at me. I'm just at @CLuzniak. Like I said, the resources are all under luzniak.com, or if you're in the US and you text debate math as one word to 44222, it will email you the resources from tonight. My blog there is at the bottom. Use the hashtag debate math and see what other people are doing. Feel free to reach out with questions, ideas. I love to come do webinars with schools and visit schools and stuff. So let me know what I can do. And I'll stick around for a little bit. If you have any questions, feel free to tweet or chat here. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. That was a wonderful presentation. Just to let everybody know what's on tap for next week. Next week, we have breathing life into geometry with coding. And this is being presented by Mike Larson and Ashley Goetz. So I hope that if that is something that is interesting to you, that you will join us again next week. And once again, thank you for a wonderful presentation, Chris.
Thank you.